What's up, guys? Hello, it's Football Talk here. Starting off the final week of a divisional draft and roster review series. We've already discussed the NFC and AFC North, East and South, so now let's head west and put the Cardinals, Rams, 49ers and Seahawks under the microscope. If this is your first time joining me for one of these videos, we take a look at all 32 NFL teams, talk about every single player they drafted, then analyze what their role in the new team might look like, talk about each of these draft classes collectively, how they used the resources available, and what it means in the overall spectrum of that franchise's roster construction. And at the end of the video, we stack those four classes up against each other. I added timestamps down below, as well as my social media handles, along with the link to my page, hellotofootballtalk.com, if you want to check out all my other content. And at this point, I want to quickly mention that if you do enjoy the analysis, please help me out by leaving a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. But now, let's kick things off with the Arizona Cardinals. They moved back from 3 to 12 and then back up to 6, acquiring a first and third rounder from the Texans next year, along with pick 81 coming back from the Lions, whilst giving up pick 33, a third and fourth rounder this year. So altogether a major plus for them, while still getting the player that they were rumored to be targeting anyway, as we got down to the final couple of days before the draft. So they start things off with Paris Johnson Jr., the offensive tackle of Ohio State, 6th overall. Then in the second round, 41st overall, B.J. Ojulari, edge defender LSU. Two third rounders, 72nd overall Garrett Williams, cornerback Syracuse, and 94th overall Michael Wilson, wide receiver Stanford. In the fourth round, 122nd overall, John Gaines II, interior offensive lineman at UCLA. Two fifth rounders, 139th overall Clayton Tune, quarterback Houston, and 168th overall Owen Papo, linebacker Auburn, and then two more sixth rounders, 180th overall Keitrell Clark, cornerback Louisville, and 213th overall Dante Stills, interior defensive lineman West Virginia. It sounded like Kyler Murray really bit the drum for Paris Johnson to improve their pass protection once he returns to the lineup, and with the extra draft capital picked up here, that's a fine selection. The smoothest tackle in this class, well coordinated in his pass sets, being able to redirect laterally without issues, forces rushers to take a wider path constantly with those 36 plus inch arms. Yet if you do want to attack his chest, he has the mobility in his joints to re-anchor, and he's not this finesse pass protector who won't go after it in the run game. The grip strength, demeanor and leg drive are all there to create movement, particularly in the way he can latch, steer and sustain blocks and zone concepts, while having the short area agility to get to the outside pack of guys on the front side, or the scoop free techniques away from the point of attack. And then I think you can continue building on what he does as a puller, getting him out wide on pin and pull or crack toss stuff. His things to clean up, his base can get a little narrow as he turns his legs in the run game, and in pass pro, his hands are a little high and wide, while still having room to get stronger. Either way, this guy has elite movement skills and the right mindset, who already played a solid season at guard in 2021, and then was a consensus All-American this first season out at left tackle. Arizona extended DJ Humphries a year ago, but they have an out in his contract next offseason if they don't want to pay him the last two of those. Paris only has one season on the left side, so maybe you can cross-train him, and with that experience at guard, he could fit into one of those slots as well. So he can be an upgrade anywhere, and gives it the flexibility not only right now, but also long term. Then back up in the second round, they allowed the Titans now to move up 8 spots in exchange for move up by 9 spots in the third, and another third round in 2024. So really getting back a premium here in a push for quarterback Will Levis. And Arizona themselves ended up with B.J. Ojulari, my number 5 edge defender, and somebody who has so many clubs in his bag as a pass rusher, can win in a multitude of ways, where at 6'2" with his bend, he can pull off ghost moves, but also has 34.25 inch arms to extend his reach of his hand swipes, great lateral quicks to cross-face tackles or overstep to the outside, and has the plan to stack moves on top of each other, being able to identify and attack the weaknesses of the guy across from him. In the run game, he's really worked on being more sturdy, and maximizing his length to lock out against blockers on the edge, flattens down the lines and unblocked defender from the backside, and has the suddenness to elude traffic behind the line of scrimmage, along with displaying active eyes when bailing out in coverage a few times per game. He's not the type of hard-nosed run defender his brother Aziz, now with the Giants, was at Georgia, without that violence in his hands, and still learning how to effectively convert speed to power. However, for a Cardinals team that just lost J.G. Watt and Zach Allen, and just needed somebody who can legitimately win the corner, you get this bendy, undersized pass rusher that makes a lot of sense. In the third round, they try to cash in on a highly talented corner, coming off a torn ACL. Garrett Williams isn't as tall or long as I expected based on watching him, at around 5'11 and 31-inch arms, but he showcases light feet and impressive fluidity. In soft press, he can mirror, flip, and run with fast guys stride for the most part. Yet playing off, he also shows a nice balance between giving ground, shuffling, and driving on routes, while taking care of his assignments in deep zone coverage and understanding when he can fall off routes, before really competing for the ball at his highest point and swiping through the reach of the intended target to knock the ball loose exceptionally well. Definitely more smooth and sudden, lots of 2-deep coverages with the orange, where he wasn't tested as an island type of corner, and I thought this past season there was less urgency to get involved against the run. Yet if he was healthy and was able to partake in the pre-draft circuit, he's most likely going in the second round, and I believe on this Cardinals team, he might just be the top corner right away, the other position that they've really struggled to find answers at. The final top 100 selection for them, Michael Wilson, is another guy with injury concerns, but whose draft stock actually went way up after cooking guys all senior bowl week long. Highly advanced footwork, where he can challenge DBs in a variety of ways off the line, and he trains with TJ Houshmandzadeh, which shows up in the way he already incorporates different speeds and step sequences, while showcasing the flexibility to reduce his height to 6'2", and creating separation out of his breaks. You see impressive hand-eye coordination and some tremendous pure-hitting high-point grabs, and while he may not make people flat out miss a whole lot, he feels pursued and is able to turn the other way for plus yards effectively. The worry here is being lost for the 2020 and 22 seasons at some points, and he's only put up less than 900 receiving yards over the last 3 years combined. Struggles a bit with passes coming in that grey area of which technique to use in order to catch the ball. A little too much sauce when trying to get into his routes at times, and his play strength I would say is a bit underwhelming for being 205 pounds. But this is a guy who has played every receiver spot for Stanford and can win in different ways, whilst being a technically sound blocker on top of it. So if he can stay healthy and become a little more physical, and they do ultimately want to move on from DeAndre Hopkins, I think this guy has the ability to win as the X, but also be a movable piece, along with the speed that they have around him in the receiving corps. I'll try to go quicker with the 3 guys, but multiple names I really like here. John Gaines had an elite combat performance among guards, where if he wasn't a little undersized, at 6'3", just over 300 pounds, his spider charge would almost be a perfect circle, and that athleticism can best shine on wide zone concepts, with the way he explodes out of his stance and can cover ground with his first steps, and has the flexibility in his hips to work across the face of down linemen, as well as getting to his landmarks and long pulls. Almost jumps out into his pass sets, where the tremendous change of direction shows up with the way he can mirror twitchy rushers on the inside, and he manages that space between the center and tackle very well, guiding his rushers towards the help and stay in position to cut off potential twists, but lacks real force in his hands and the power to just dig one techniques out of the A-gap, while playing quite tall limits his ability for those feet to shine, and he presents rather soft edges. Gaines now combined with a couple of guards I really liked him selecting on day 3 last year, gives them some really interesting developmental prospects on the interior. Clayton Tune was my QB10 in this class, somebody at 6'3", 215 pounds, who throws the ball with anticipation and plus ball location, with shoulders always pointing north, and not minding hanging at the top of his drop. Consistently rips passes in the intermediate range, but also excels on those into the bucket throws, capable of working through progressions in a disciplined fashion when asked to, plus then he has a feel for secondary creation plays, and was a very effective run at Houston, with 4.64 speed, and a feel for reducing the area for defenders to hit. Definitely benefited from working in a wide open offense, where Tank Dell as the number 1 was there for him constantly, tends to stare on his primary, and has to show better eye discipline to not lead ancillary coverage defenders towards his targets, while his eyes drop and the second hand comes off the ball too often as he feels any type of pressure. I thought this was a guy capable of being a spot starter for a team at some point, and whether the Cardinals want to see what they have in him, whilst having the benefit of improving the draft stock next year, or Colt McCoy gets hurt, I think he's a guy who we could see for an extended stretch this season. Owen Pappoe was nicknamed the Freak by people at Auburn because he runs a 4.39, and just watching that bone-crushing hit he put on Penn State Sean Clifford last year, you understand the force he can build up with it when he gets a chance to crash through one shoulder of blockers, truck running backs in protection, or separate receivers in the vicinity from the ball in coverage. But only 6 foot even, 225 pounds, has his problems reading up plays and dealing with contact in tight quarters, too many drag tackles where he doesn't have that runway to just light people up, and lacks a certain awareness for targets settling down around him in zone coverage. With Kazir White being signed in for agency to pair up with Zayvon Collins, and having Isaiah Simmons as this versatile piece who they can play as a big slot defender or put him inside depending on down and distance, I wouldn't expect to see Pappoe getting on defense a whole lot, other than maybe some pressure packages, but could flash on special teams a few times with his speed and affinity for hitting people. And then in the 6th round, they get a couple of guys I could really see make an impact. Keitrell Clark, especially if they do end up trading away Buda Baker, might just end up starting for them in the slot. Looking at his physicality to run through blockers and blow up screenplays, which really was on display during Shrine Bowl week. While in zone coverage, he finds a good balance between gaining enough depth to make quarterbacks go underneath, yet staying ready to get back downhill as the ball comes out, being able to follow receivers towards his help, and competing for the catch points when he ends up running with somebody down the field. Just has sub 30-inch arms, and unlike top tier recovery burst, while being way too undisciplined in Louisville, got charged with 16 penalties across the past 2 seasons, and missed 11 of 62 tackling attempts last year alone, either leaving his feet or trying to slink us to the turf with just his arms. And Dante Stills was a player I outlined as part of the My Guys video about a month ahead of the draft, especially with Arizona losing a couple of impact players on the D-line. This is somebody at 6'4", 285 pounds, was asked to line up anywhere from a 2-eye to a 6 technique, being able to stack and jet blockers near the point of attack, but even better at knifing through gaps and creating disruption in the run game, while showcasing an impressive combination of short area agility and flexibility to corner his rushes. With being a non-stop worker, the reason I believe he might have made it here has been a bit of a tweener body type wise, who plays too tall in the run game and spins off blocks too much, and can get a little out of control as a pass rusher, but just watching him beat up everybody at Shrine Bowl practices and put up borderline elite testing numbers at the combine, I had him just inside my top 100 overall prospects. So as a whole, I really like the way new general manager Monty Austinford maneuvered around the board, picking up that extra 1st and 3rd rounder from the Texans next year, where right now based on projected win totals, they would hold the 1st and 2nd overall pick in the draft next year, which includes 2 legit star quarterbacks. So these could end up being franchise-altering events, and we see which direction this group may be heading if they do have a decision to make in Cal next offseason. For now, they still get my offensive tackle 1, my number 5 edge defender, a highly talented corner on a discount coming off injury, and a receiver with a bit of an injury history as well, but has all the skills to be successful in the pros, along with some really nice value selection on day 3. After years of questionable drafting early and targeting these hybrid defenders under Steve Keim, I already outlined Monty as one of my draft winners because he did a much better job of acquiring additional value and finding quality players throughout the draft. This is still one of the weakest rosters in the NFL, but if they end up with at least 1 pick in the top 2 next year and decide to stick with Kyler, they can at least continue playing this game of moving back and collecting extra shots at talent. So I definitely like the new direction that they're heading, and if it wasn't for another team in this division putting together a really strong weekend, we'd be singing the praises even more so. Let's now move on though to the Los Angeles Rams, who went from F them picks to make all of them picks. And I think it's really funny how everybody before the draft said, oh, they won't make all the selections. Well, they did. All 14 of them. I'll quickly rattle them off here. No 1st rounder, but then in the 2nd, 36th overall, Steve Avila, interior offensive lineman TCU, 2 3rd rounders, 77th overall Byron Young, edge defender Tennessee, and 89th overall Kobe Turner, interior defensive lineman Wake Forest. In the 4th round, 128th overall Stetson Bennett, quarterback Georgia. 4 5th rounders, Nick Hampton, edge defender Appalachian State, Warren McClendon Jr., offensive tackle Georgia, Davis Allen, Tiny Clemson, and Puka Nacua, wide receiver BYU. 3 6th rounders, Travis Hodges Tomlinson, cornerback TCU, Ocha Mathis, edge defender Nebraska, and Zach Evans, running back Ole Miss. And then 3 more guys in the 7th round, Ethan Evans, punter Wingate, Jason Taylor II, safety Oklahoma State, and Desmond Johnson, interior defensive lineman Toledo. This marks the end of the Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford trade with Detroit finally, as the Rams first got on the clock here 5 picks into the 2nd round, and went with a very safe option I would say in Steve Avila, a guy who's been a steady Eddie at center and guard for TCU over the last 3 years, and has shown improvement in each of those. Presents excellent girth throughout his 6'4", 330-pound frame, but is surprisingly quick out of his stance for the size, excellent in terms of his first steps and fitting his hands, while continuing to run his feet and showing the dexterity to sustain blocks and zone schemes. In pass pro, he's quick to land his hands on rushers and take away room to breathe for them, utilizes alternate hand usage to keep those guys off kilter, and has a seemingly unbreakable anchor, while showing the football IQ to communicate and overtake responsibilities against gap exchanges. I don't think he has the agility to legitimately reach block shade alignments one-on-one, has rather small hands which hurts his ability to secure that far peg and a good penetration up to place that gap, and in pass pro, he should work on getting better depth in order to be able to help out his buddies. For an offensive line that really struggled this past season right off the bat, it was the foulest apple I thought. Now you put Avila next to Brian Allen and a very high floor player in last year's third round and Logan Bruss. Rob Havenstein as right tackle has been very consistent for them, and hopefully Joe Noteboom can stay healthy on the opposite end. Now you go from a catastrophic unit to what can at least be close to average. That should make a big difference for them. Pick 77, they got back in the Jalen Ramsey trades, but go with the edge position on a defense instead with Byron Young, the one from Tennessee, since we had another one with the exact same name on the interior D-line from Alabama. Put up elite explosive numbers at the combine, with a 4.43 in the 40, and testing above the 90th percentile, both the jumps as well, which shows up in his jump off the snap to stress tackles vertically, then really digs those hands inside the chest, and has the ankle flexibility to corners rushes. He's consistent with the way he locks out, and sets the edge in the run game, has the speed to run down plays from the backside, and he's a very strong tackler, who wraps, stands up, and drives his leg through contact with the bulk area. But all of his size measurables and the 17th percentile are worse, with only 32.5 inch arms and 9.25 inch hands. He could still do a better job of rolling his hips into contact and being able to disengage from blocks, whilst not having great bends to go underneath the reach of pass protectors and not getting to a secondary rush counter well enough yet. I personally had Young as my edge 15, mostly because of how strong the class is as a whole, but with Leonard Floyd still in the open market, and how the rest of the depth chart looks like on defense for LA, this might end up being the guy asked to be the top threat coming off the edge for them. 12 picks later, they addressed the interior defensive line with Kobe Turner, a guy with some alignment versatility at 6'3", 290 pounds, can be a legit disruptor if you just ask him to win the gap, but his ability to recognize run schemes and deconstruct blocks is very impressive for a young player, being able to stay square with guys and putting on elite numbers in the agility drills at his pro day. He brings violence in his hands and great motor to the table as a pass rusher, being able to work the depth of the pocket, but also circle around bodies, along with freeing himself late a lot of times with a swift spin move. He put up a tremendous 15.1 pass rush win rate this past season, and earned a PFF grade of 92.2, just ahead of Pitt's Kalijah Kancey even, who went 19th overall to Tampa Bay. Only has 32-inch arms, and you see quite a bit where blockers get into his frame first, and he can't disengage anymore, which, being a little late and inaccurate with his hands at times, hurts him, and he ends up on the turf more than you'd like to see. But other than the big body space eater and young Bobby Brown, the Rams had nothing on the interior next to Aaron Donald, so getting a versatile piece like this makes a lot of sense, and I think this is a play on the rise. Then we get to day 3, and the pick that apparently had the Rams brass jumping out of their chairs with quarterback Stetson Bennett, who immediately after they picked him said they really want to bring in a quarterback who knows his role and doesn't create issues, which isn't a great endorsement to be honest. Now, Stetson is a slick dude, with the way he gets the ball out in different arm angles and extends plays, creates a lot of torque as a thrower in order to push the ball on the field, and there are way more power throws between the numbers in the 15 to 20 yard range than you'd think, that aren't necessarily just there because of timing. Plus, he has shocking bursts as a runner and was frequently used in designed plays like quarterback sweeps. That being said, it's not a very calm watch where you see excess steps and not really a smooth process in the way he gets to his targets. Did benefit from being the triggerman for an extremely well designed offense under Todd Monken and an absolutely dominant defense to complement him. Plus, he'll be the lightest quarterback in the NFL and will already turn 26 midway through his rookie season, so while I believe he could hang around for a while as a backup, not sure I'd go crazy for him in the 4th round. A guy I did really like and pointed out as one of my guys at the start of April is Nick Hampton. He was part of Bruce Feldman's freak list thanks to the crazy numbers he put up in the weight room, and then he also ran a 4.58 at the combine. Rapid hands to defeat blocks, but packs more force than you'd expect in the sub 240 pound range. Tremendous bend rushing the passer, who was challenging wiggle to him in order to crossface tackles, always setting against that speed, and he's just relentless in the way he keeps on working. Simply doesn't have any bulk to his frame, yet at least, in order to put him on the field a whole lot on early downs, and lacks a great power element as a rusher, while overall being able to freelance a lot at App State, and not always taking care of his contain responsibilities. But with what I already said about what this roster looks like, if he can get his body more up to NFL standards this offseason, I would not be shocked if he ends up sneaking his way atop the list in terms of sacks for this entire Rams defense, apart from Aaron Donald of course. Warren McClendon was the guy on the other end of the offensive line from Broderick Jones at Georgia. Not as much of a bull in the run game, uses legit speed rushers, challenges outside edge, and then he doesn't have great lateral agility to mirror inside counters, but has a massive 82 3/4 inch wingspan and maintains a wide base in order to keep pass rushers at bay and force them to take a wider arc around him, whilst being able to shield bodies in the run game consistently. He has a chance to end up being the primary backup at offensive tackle. Davis Allen was a top 10 tight end in this class for me, 6'6", 245 pounds, initiates contact with low pads, and shoots his hips through in order to create movement as a blocker, while keeping his weight centered with a wide base and active feet, while Clemson used his skills to take care of vertical defenders in space quite regularly, off motion and in the screen game. I called him a graceful mover at his weight, and thought he was able to drop his hips very effectively on cuts, while plucking the ball at its highest point. Never dropped more than one pass in the season, and had an insane contested catch rate in college, over 90% last season, being able to pin the ball against his chest and keeping it there through contact. I just didn't think the physicality as a route runner was up to par with that, and he's not like a dynamic space player, but good value here, and there's a path for him to work his way towards Titan 2 status. Puka Nacua is another underrated pass catcher, has legit juice of the ball, despite packing plenty of muscle at 6'1", 210 pounds, being able to beat safeties across the face and post routes after throwing in some head fakes, but he can also stop on a dime for calls, and shows the awareness for shuffling along as windows in zone coverage change late on during plays. Averaged an insane 3.53 yards per route run last season, thanks in part to dealing well with passes that were slightly off target, and the bursty style with the ball in his hands to create offense. He's a pretty upright route runner, which leads to some rounded breaks, and worries about him getting hung up with contact, and a bit of an injury history here, but among a wide receiver crew that beyond Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson, who have both missed time before in the past, consists of Ben Skowronek, Tutu Atwell, and Lance McCutcheon, we could see him hit the field more than most guys, going in the 170s, and if you look at his usage with BYU on fly sweeps and screen passes, he could be McVay's new version of Robert Woods, even though based on draft capital, it obviously is a long way for him to be featured in that type of role eventually. Trey Hodges-Tomlinson plays a lot bigger than his 5'9", 180-pound frame would indicate, and primarily lined up on the perimeter, never seems scared of speed, and has some really impressive reps running with sprinters like Xavier Worthy from Texas, easy with the way he gains ground, and then plants and drives as well as any corner in this class, while showing great understanding for zone coverage and having been a reliable tackle on the perimeter. At his size, he'll get pushed off by some physical receivers in the NFL, while 29-inch arms do limit him in some capacity, and 14 penalties this past season is just wild. Maybe he can survive on the perimeter in a quarter-space defensive scheme, but I think with how light the depth chart looks like, we might see him play some snaps inside and out for them. O'Shawn Matthews on the edge, however, has his arm length and hand size in the 94th and 95th percentile, with good thickness throughout his frame, is able to stand his ground or create angles to the ball in the run game, whilst packing plenty of pop in his hands, and can work off the long arm in the pass game, along with the mobility in his ankles to circle around blockers, and change of direction skills give him some intriguing tools, although he digs his head into blockers quite a bit, and too much of a reactionary pass rusher at this point, without a legit go-to move he can build around. Zach Evans was one of my biggest steals of the entire draft. I explained that in my general draft recap, and had an extensive scouting report up at heraldsoffootballtalk.com, but he was my RB4, and I think got a bad rap for being a mature runner, instead of trying to look for the home run play all the time cutbacks. Tremendous curvilinear movement when he works out to the corner, is able to really explode through the hole and into contact, with incredible balance to stay upright, and he has soft hands as a receiver, not a lot of winning as a route runner, fumbled 5 times across 320 career touches, and he was the number 2 for Ole Miss last season, behind freshman Quinshon Judkins, but I believe he has the talent to outproduce so many guys selected ahead of him, and I think with the Rams openly wanting to get rid of Cam Akers last year already, before his late season run, I think we could see Evans get a lot of work, in contrast to his draft status. Nothing on the punt out of Wingate. Other than that, I'm aware he has some clips on YouTube with insane hang times, but even those other 2 7th rounders. Jason Taylor has legit box safety size and the play strength to work in tighter spaces, with plenty of hitting power, yet he put up elite testing numbers and was deployed regularly in the high post, and explosiveness shows when driving on routes and man coverage, with great recognition for what's coming. He just needs to learn staying on his feet as a tackler, and he really only had this one season of extensive ball production, but I think he absolutely makes this roster, and even beyond that, Memphis' Gwendell Johnson is an undrafted free agent I really like, and outlined in an article on those about a month ago. And Mr. Irrelevant Desmond Johnson is a 6'2", 270-pound defensive lineman who lined up all over the front for Toledo, at times as freaking shade nose tackle, a lot of violence in his hands, being able to reset the line of scrimmage and press off blockers, as well as put guys into retreat mode, whilst having moments of beautiful link in his upper half and hips, pulling off swim and spin moves. At this point, just more focus on thrusting himself into bodies rather than IDing plays, and needs to do a better job of attacking the edges of pass protectors. To me, he profiles as somebody playing the B-gap primarily, but could easily be a big defensive end for even front teams, and then kick inside on passing downs. So I'm looking forward to what the plan is here under Raheem Morris and how he could create chaos. So a huge class here to break down, and I've spent plenty of time now talking about all the skill sets to a certain degree. Steve Avila and those two guys on the defensive line were clearly targets for positions of weakness, and they bring in a backup quarterback who's had a lot of success as a two-time national champ. And beyond that, they just threw a bunch of bodies at that defense, which I outlined shortly before the draft, how this unit may not hold anybody under 30 points unless Aaron Donald goes crazy. Plenty of names I like things about, and the idea here is to just see who sticks, and now they can put together that defensive unit without the financial resources to acquire proven talent as they work through this rebuilding phase. With Sean McVay and Matt Stafford coming back, this offense could be a lot more effective, now that the offensive line seems to be more stable, and with Morris being able to put a stamp on the defense with just one player to really send the system around. We'll see how they come together on that side of the ball, with lots of healthy competition for playing time. That brings us to team number 3 here, the San Francisco 49ers, who thankfully only with 9 selections here, and they didn't want to wait all the way to pick 98th overall, already been dead last in terms of getting involved among NFL teams, as they moved up 11 spots in exchange for picks 164 and 222. So with those 3 third rounders, 87th, 99th, and 101st overall, they select Jair Brown, safety Penn State, Jake Moody, kicker Michigan, and Cameron Latu, tight end Alabama. 2 5th rounders, 155th overall, Darrell Luda Jr., cornerback South Alabama, and 173rd overall, Robert Beal Jr., edge defender Georgia. Then in the 6th round, 216th overall, D. Winters, linebacker TCU. And then 3 more guys in the 7th round, Braden Willis, tight end / fullback out of Oklahoma, Ronnie Bell, wide receiver Michigan, and Jalen Graham, linebacker Purdue. Jair Brown was my number 8 safety, and somebody I've really enjoyed watching over the last couple of years. Good size for any role in the secondary at 5'11", 205 pounds, actively approaches blockers, striking with his hands, being able to sort through trash, and not shying away from throwing his body into the action. Penn State ran a bunch of split safety coverages, where his ability to drive in routes in front of him could really shine, yet he was trusted playing the deep middle as well, with the instincts and adequate range to make impact plays from that spot. You love what he can bring dropping down as a robber and tracking the eyes of the quarterback, patient in man coverage when lined up in the slot, and a ferocious blitzer who won't even slow down if offensive linemen slide in front of him. Running a 4.65 at the combine is worrisome. His aggressiveness with his angles and technique as a tackler can put him being reckless, and I don't see him as somebody who you'll be happy with being locked up with dynamic slot receivers, truly one-on-one for extended stretches, but very much in the mold of a smart, all-around combo safety that San Francisco's coveted under DeMeco Ryans. And even if we see more cover 3 under Steve Wilkes now defensive coordinator, we like what Brown presents as more of a traditional strong safety as well, which they needed to target after Jimmy Ward followed DeMeco to Houston. Once again, I don't discuss specialists here, which a top 100 pick is just not worth it to me, with how little draft positions determined how good those guys have been in the NFL. But I do know, of course, that Moody has made a bunch of big kicks and was the number 1 on almost every team's board. Cameron Latu is the final D2 pick, is somebody who was very effective working with Bryce Young at Alabama as one of the 2 regularly trusted targets. May never be an overwhelming blocker physically, but his effort and active feet are excellent. Really good at those on-the-move blocks and fly sweeps and screens of motion. Watching the tape, I felt like Latu consistently was able to get off the ball that split second earlier than the rest of those guys at Alabama. Has some wiggle to him to create some room out of his breaks, shows a natural feel for finding and working towards open space, while his understanding for which secondary route to get to and how crafty he is made him a great red zone target. Yet too often you see edge defenders work off and block and late, lacks great explosion or long speed to really scare defenses as a receiver, underhand catches the ball more than you'd like to see, and there's a certain delay as he tries to turn up the field. So obviously not going to unseat George Kittle, but with Charlie Werner and to a lesser degree Ross Dwelly being guys who primarily get on the field for the blocking, and now you add somebody who can work in line, but can also get open against different looks when you do spread things out a little bit more, which is where a guy like Brock Purdy can shine. Darrell Luda as a corner got too late in the process, but felt compelled to point it out as one of the biggest sleepers in the draft. Long, loose athlete with 32.5-inch arms and large hands, who looks like a natural at the moment he put on the tape. Impressive feat to mirror and match with the line, but staying square to his man, even against the late and more intricate releases, with the speed to carry vertically and work around traffic, sticking to guys coming across the field. Impressive spatial awareness as his own defender, positioning himself between routes and communicating with his nearby teammates, who fouls targets towards the deep safeties and impedes the progress of the line of guys, while being willing to stick his face in the fan in the run game and condensing the edge with sound tackling. You see some tightness in his ankles and some limitation with changing directions due to his high cut build, while lacking high level recovery burst if he does surrender some early separation, which will be more apparent against skilled route runners in the NFL. Javarius Ward was a nice addition to the corner room with more of a press mindset and ability to play quasi-man on the backside of 3x1 sets, while he signed former Falcon Isaiah Oliver to be the designated nickel without Ward now, but I think Luda could easily be in the battle for that second outside spot with the orbital lure. Robert Beal put up some pretty insane numbers at the Combine, even though he was somewhat overshadowed by his Georgia teammate Nolan Smith, well-built, athletic outside linebacker at 6'4", 250 pounds, who played his best ball this past season, brings heavy hands at contact, and not somebody who can really leave unblocked at any point on the backside of run plays. When he times up the snap well, his get-off will stress tackles in the pass sets, packs a pretty effective long arm off a couple of quick steps up the field, with the wingspan of his near 7-footer, transitions well from power to the dip and rip, and when he sees the quarterback step up, he pulls the outside arm over in order to wrap that guy up quite a few times. Beal's block deconstruction and hand usage are still a bit of a work in progress as a run defender, and he doesn't rush the passer with much of a plan or technical nuance yet, but more so a feel and athleticism, whilst being more of a straight-on athlete, I would say, in that regard. So another toy for defensive line coach Chris Kasorik, with how many of these types of athletic guys he's turned into useful players in recent years. D. Winters is a linebacker who aggressively triggers downhill against the run, and was utilized on some early down blitzes to create negative plays, consistently looking to shoot for lanes, and if blockers are able to get to him, he feels and fights for contact. Go back and watch him against Michigan in the college football playoff semifinal, where he constantly was in the offensive backfield. As a coverage defender, he's light enough on his feet to match stick, hook, or out routes by the tight end effectively, and shows good awareness for crosses coming in behind him, being able to sink underneath those, and once the ball leaves the quarterback's hand, this guy pursues with a passion. His aggressiveness can bite him in the ass at times when he tries to scrape over blocks from the backside and just overruns plays, isn't afraid to throw his body into linemen, but not the type of power to actually create knockback, and he's missed at least 15 tackles in each of the last 3 seasons as a starter. I think this is very much a move with Dre Greenlaw in mind, who's come off a career year and is looking to cash in next offseason, which the Niners may not be able to afford that kind of money being invested into 2 linebackers, and Winters has a chance to prove himself on special teams this season. Braden Willis was a versatile offensive piece for Oklahoma these last few years, lined up inline, wing, in the slots, but also playing at fullback, where he can execute a lot of more challenging blocks in space, and was very efficient with his touches in the pass game, but doesn't have the athleticism or size to really transition to side end, and the Niners obviously have Kyle Juszczyk there already, who's a superior version of that type of profile in every way basically. Maybe they think they can stash him in the practice squad for a year, and then slowly bring him along next season as a key member on teams, if they eventually want to make a switch for a cheaper option. Ronnie Bell is a 6'even", 195-pound receiver with easy acceleration of the line and loose movement skills, showcases a great feel to drift towards open space, plucks the ball out of the air without having to slow down the run, and fluidly adjusts to off-center placement, shows good vision with the ball in his hands on sweeps and end arounds, to lead defenders to one side of the block and cut the other way, and then he keeps himself alive after the catch, frequently slipping away from guys or spinning off hits. That's why Michigan made a priority to put the ball in his hands on reverses or rail routes of screen fakes. Does feature a pretty slender build and his unproven contested catch situations, didn't run many intricate routes and stuff where he really needed to be precise in his breaks, so he may need to be an offset Z or slot receiver at the next level, since we haven't really seen him release off press in multiple ways. A bit of a different style of receiver to Danny Gray and Raymond McLeod among those secondary options on the depth chart, but what they all have in common is what they can provide after the catch. Finally, Jalen Graham is an urgent player on the second level, who trusts what his eyes tell him and makes use of those 33-inch arms to keep blockers away from his frame, whilst having cut down his missed tackle rate each of the past 3 seasons, plays with active eyes and good length and zone coverage, and has experience sliding out into the slot to cover tight ends and man, with passer ratings around 70 each of the last 2 years. Does play pretty upright, which limits how efficient he can be in his coverage transitions, whilst showing a very poor size to speed relationship, running a 4.64 at only 220 pounds, not showing the wheels in pursuit to chase down things outside his area a whole lot. He'll face a tough climb trying to make that roster, but if he does make it, it might be as a designated matchup player if they want to run more man, and maybe a dime backer thanks to his coverage profile. Certainly not my favorite draft class overall. I thought without the pick until the very end of day 2, they didn't have the luxury necessary to use the top 100 selection on the kicker. Don't love Latu right after that as somebody I see as a major impact player on an every down basis at any point really. Luda at the top of the 5th round I'm a huge fan of, but even after that, nobody I see playing extended snaps for this unit in 2023, which otherwise set up yet again to compete for the conference. And even beyond that, I have some questions. If Jai Brown can be a valuable starter in the secondary and Moody drills some game winners in the playoffs, the 49er faithful won't really complain. But I thought even when taking the limited draft capital into account, this was one of the weaker classes in the league, and considering the Eagles had one of the very best, the gap might have widened a little bit. Not looking forward to a pissed off Philly squad, listening to Deebo Samuel and company talking about how the conference championship basically doesn't count since they were playing 10 versus 11, which isn't that wrong, but I thought they were a slightly better team that day regardless. And there's another team that'll challenge San Francisco inside the division even more so this season, especially after what they were able to do over the course of draft weekends. The Seattle Seahawks, who made the playoffs in the NFC in a supposed rebuilding year after trading away Russell Wilson and putting the team in the hands of a 10-year veteran Geno Smith, who we hadn't seen anything close to what he did in 22 prior to it. Thanks to that Russ trade, however, they not only had the pick 20 from themselves, but also the 5th overall selection, which they ended up using on Devon Witherspoon, cornerback Illinois, and then with their own selection 20th overall Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver Ohio State, 2 second rounders, 37th overall Derek Hall, edge defender Auburn, and 52nd overall Zach Charbonnet, running back UCLA, 2 4th rounders, 108th overall Anthony Bradford, interior offensive lineman LSU, and 123rd overall Cameron Young, interior defensive lineman out of Mississippi State. 2 Michigan guys in the 5th round, only a couple of picks apart, Mike Morris, edge defender / interior D lineman, and Olusegun Oluwatimi, interior offensive lineman. 6th round, 198th overall, Jarek Reed II, safety New Mexico, and then in the 7th round, 237th overall, Kenny McIntosh, running back Georgia. Witherspoon was one of my favorite players in this entire draft. When you're talking about somebody who has that dog in him, this guy's it. Doesn't stay blocked to plays, and watching the tape he put on the Indiana running back on a little swing screen makes my bones feel all tingly right now still. However, his coverage still is highly impressive, with the way he can run with anybody down the field and stops his momentum exceptionally well as the receiver snaps off his route. His click and close explosion playing off is as good as any corner I've watched over the last 5 years at least. Understands his leverage, where to expect breaks, and when to turn vertically and match his own coverages, but also tremendous closing burst when he gets off his landmarks in that regard, or somebody's able to get him turned the wrong way, and then he's so unbelievably feisty at the catch points to rake the ball out. He does feature a pretty slender build at 6 foot flat, 180 pounds, and he does get pretty handsy when receivers are able to get to the edges of his frame, and he needs to fully turn his back towards the quarterback. Plus, some of the way he catches receivers down the field basically, when playing off, will draw flags at the next level for illegal contact. With that being said, he has the skill set and mindset to excel in any type of defensive scheme, and I'm extremely intrigued with how his fits alongside defensive rookie of the year candidate Rick Woolen could be in Seattle. He can explode forward in quarters and disrupt routes, but now they can also run man coverage more extensively and have tons of attitude in the back end. And then the second pick in the 1st round feels very much like one more integral piece being dropped into the offense this time. Jackson Smith-Njigba was a consensus top 15 pick a year ago, coming off a season where he outproduced Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave at Ohio State, who were picked 10th and 11th I believe last year. He missed almost all of 2022, but still was in the top tier of Zay Flowers for me as an instant impact receiver at the next level. He did certainly benefit from working almost exclusively out of the slot, in a system that created tons of space for him to work with. Doesn't give you much in terms of a vertical component, and I'd say he's a more passive blocker, but in terms of somebody who gets up to full speed in a couple of steps and understands the intricacies of the position, this kid is a pro already. The way he alters tempo, deceives defenders with body language, and then how flexible he is at the hips and ankles to execute any type of cut and present himself to the quarterback. He displays tremendous body control and ball tracking skills, and then once he's secured to catch, there's not even a millisecond delay for him to turn north. Plus he can find another gear as a runner and give a little shake along with turning his body away from would-be tacklers. This is one of my favorite fits of the entire draft, because JSN is a plug-and-play starter in the slot for Seattle, who complements 2 more vertical receivers in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett perfectly, gives them that over-the-middle pass catcher and a run-after-catch specialist to create easy offense and be a chain move on 3rd downs. All of those guys will even that offense, orchestrated by Geno, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if this guy caught 70 balls and flirted with the 1,000 yard mark as a rookie already. Then we go to the 2nd round and start with Derek Hall, 6'3", 250 pounds, with a dense build but 34.5-inch arms. Certainly has the upper hand against tight ends at the point of attack, but you really like his speed in pursuit and what he can provide when he sees a chance to slip blockers in order to chase after the ball. Looks like he's shot out of a cannon a lot of times when he times up the snap correctly. This past season I thought he got a lot more effective at converting speed to power from those wide alignments and rolling his hips for contact in order to push tackles back, then takes advantage of opportunities to dig through the inside shoulder and hunts down scrambling quarterbacks once he's flushed them out of the pocket, does peek inside of blocks and gets his eyes trapped at times, while as a pass rusher there's a little bit of tightness that limits his ability to properly corner, and has a fairly simplistic arsenal of moves without any reliable counters at this point. Looking at this edge group for Seattle, I guess they're only wanting that one true veteran in General Wosu, and then put a bunch of young guys they can rotate through along with him, as they've now selected somebody in the second round at that position each of the last 3 years in Darrell Taylor, Boye Mafe, and now Hall, who I could see being the most productive of the bunch, depending on the development of Mafe, who I think is still a little more physically gifted. And the Hawks also go back-to-back running backs in the second round, as they follow up Kenneth Walker last year with Zach Charbonnet here. My clear-cut number 3 running back and a top 50 overall prospect on my board. He's really improved his pacing as a runner, staying true to run concepts and allowing lanes to develop, working zone and power primarily. This young man runs with incredible balance and force, packs an effective jump cut and a nasty stiff arm in order to get around guys, never goes down without a fight, and pulls himself out of wraps, yet then is burst to pull away from Pac-12 defenders while surprising at around 220 pounds, has pretty soft hands, doesn't waste any time getting upfield after the catch, but also has more to him, being able to make flat defenders miss than you'd think. Now, he doesn't have that ability to make those sharp transitions all the time, where you see some additional steps and a certain lack of suddenness compared to the guys ahead of him in this class, and is now teammate in Kenneth Walker. While his usage in the pass game was very simplistic, with a bunch of swing and flat routes, not seeing the ability to actually cross guys up one-on-one. With that being said, while it may appear confusing to some people that they go back-to-back running backs, considering Walker was dealing with some nicks and bruises as a rookie, and now you add much more of a bruiser who can help this group close out games, I think this gives them one of the best young duos in the backfield, who they pay a combined $12 to $13 million probably across the next 3 seasons combined. I did not watch Derek Reed, who I understand should be a special teamer with speed in the low 4.4s, while for the rest of these names, I'll try to group them together here a little bit. The 2 interior offensive linemen, Anthony Bradford and Olu Oluwatimi, both have certain qualities, but also limitations that are somewhat similar to each other. Bradford is this super powerful run blocker who can activate that dense low half with vice grip to take charge of guys on the first level or engulf linebackers, absorbs power well in his pass sets, and uses his long arms to square up guys, along with fluidity in the way transitions of twists, but plays fairly heavy-footed. It tends to lunge a lot in both facets of the game, while Olo is more of a phone booth guy as well, who you're not going to ask to execute many long pulls, while just not being the most natural at bending at the knees in order to deal with interior rushers. But very crafty run blocker, capable of taking defensive tackles out of that gap, but also reach them on the front side of wide zone typically. And then he was huge in keeping those A-gaps clean in passing situations for Michigan last year, with good dexterity and quick hands to refit against guys, as well as helping out his guards once he sees color flashing. Due to the sudden retirement of Austin Blythe shortly after the season, Ole now has a pretty clear path to win the starting gig at center over Evan Brown, who will be in competition for right guard with Phil Haynes and Bradford probably. Now switching over to the defensive side of the ball, Cam Young and Mike Morris fulfilled different roles in college, but the usage in the pros may be fairly similar. Young is 6'3", 310 pounds, comes off the ball with urgency and looking to establish first meaningful contact, whilst being able to keep blockers away from his frame with the 34.5-inch arms. Did a lot of dirty work between the A-gaps in order to keep the second level clean, but familiar with a bunch of gap exchanges too. When he bursts his hands inside the chest of guys, he can really work the depth of the pocket and keeps on hand fighting, along with displaying some off balance while he stays on his feet despite getting bumped from the side. His pads however tend to rise the longer the play takes to develop. Too often he misses his initial club and lacks the flexibility to corner his rushes accordingly. Morris on the other hand played almost exclusively on the edge for Michigan with quite a few wide alignments, yet at 6'5", 280 pounds, his height makes it a challenge to play with good leverage with regularity. He needs to do a better job of rushing half the man and lacks the quicks laterally to really challenge guys in the pass sets. What he can do is set a physical edge with heavy hands and take care of his contain assignments, as well as create stalemate with pullers in the backfield. Then he packs a forceful bull rush and can crash through the inside shoulder of tackles if they overset to the outside, and he tracks the quarterback's movements very well. I think both of these guys may be best suited at a 4-eye or 5 technique, with the length and ability to control blocks in the run game and help crush the pocket, So for a defensive front that needed that depth to be replenished to some degree, now you add youth to keep people fresh. And finally, Kenny McIntosh in the 7th round, to me is an excellent replacement for Travis Homer, who signed a 2-year $4 million deal with Chicago, and now you swap him out for this guy for minimal cash. Shows great burst to press the front side, and good vision for when to cut back zone runs. You like his burst and ability to swipe down the reach of defenders in order to get out to the corner on toss plays, and is capable of stringing together moves, even though he has more of that upright running style and not real actual breakaway speed. But if he can improve his anchor ability in pass pro, since his technique is already fine, and now he can be a legit extra receiver in the pattern thanks to his natural adjustments to the ball, ability to set up blocks off screens, and the comfort to legitimately run a full route tree when flexed out wide, he can be a valuable number 3. So all around a very strong draft yet again for Seattle, after they put together a somewhat franchise-altering class last year, when they found Rookie of the Year candidates on both sides of the ball, a new starting duo of offensive tackles, and more promising pieces. This group has a chance to be close to that level, since they didn't pick what I would consider many high variance prospects, and I can easily see them fit in with what they'll be expected to bring. Didn't love the combination of individual guys that they picked on the interior O and D line, but I understand the idea behind this, to load up on both fronts for minimal financial resources, and at worst, I believe they add cornerstone pieces on both sides of the ball, yet again, this time in the 1st round respectively. Makes a ton of sense with what the rest of the roster looks like, and how those guys are set up to be successful in roles that very much align with what they bring to the table. Now having potential the top wide receiver trio in the NFL, a tremendous young backfield, a deep rotation of edge rushers, and an aggressive secondary, if Geno can repeat his 2022 form, this is a team nobody in the NFC wants to face, and has the capability to challenge for a trip to the Super Bowl. Wrapping things up now with the divisional draft rankings. No surprise here at the top, with the way I just sung their praises, the Seahawks deserve the number 1 spot. That combination of 2 first-round picks may end up being as good as any duo of players as anybody got in this entire draft. The areas that they attacked made a lot of sense in correlation with what the rest of the roster looks like, and they're ready to challenge the big dogs in the conference, I believe. Cardinals at number 2, love new general manager Monty Austinford did in his first year of running the show, picking up great value from the Texans, but moving down outside the top 10, yet then coming back up for much lesser compensation 3 selections later, and still get the number 1 offensive tackle prospect available. They take some chances on guys in the 3rd round, who come in with injury tags included, but have the ability to be impact players at pass catcher and defender respectively, and several really interesting names on day 3 that could pay off big time down the road. This could have easily been the top class of many other divisions. Rams come in 3rd, bested everybody in sheer volume, with 14 total selections, which makes sense for what the state of the roster was in beforehand, and how much they could use this influx of new young talent. Start things off with some of the more rock-solid players available on either side of the line of scrimmage. Don't shy away from fairly unique player profiles on day 3, where a bunch of them may see the field for extended stretches this upcoming season, and will be key figures in what this roster is headed towards. As Sean McVay and Raheem Morris return to call the shots, I could see 12 of those names actually make it through final roster cuts. And finally, the Niners at the bottom. I already mentioned that I thought they had one of the weaker drafts around the league, not just because they originally wouldn't have picked until the very back end of day 2. You use one of the top 100 selections on a kicker, something between a tight end 2 and tight end 3 just after that. Too many guys in general who will be nothing but depth pieces, who you're not actively elevating to see the field for longer stretches, a bunch of fairly low value positions, and just nearly on the same level of the Eagles for example, after those two sides faced off in what should have been an epic clash in the NFC title game. Just didn't love what they did here, even though there weren't a ton of guys who would have seen the field a whole lot on non-special teams units early on anyway, based on the selections at their disposal, considering what this roster looked like already. That does it for another one of these videos, however. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video and can appreciate somebody spending several hundreds of hours evaluating college prospects and sharing my thoughts in the context of team building for each franchise, just letting me know with a thumbs up and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any thoughts on this topic or any questions you'd still like to ask, you can just drop me a comment down below, and feel free to share this with a fan of one of these teams who might be interested in this very detailed content, instead of listening to the same discussions you hear every day on mainstream media outlets. We're almost at the end of this series, as we'll finish up with the division that includes the reigning Super Bowl champs on Friday in the Chiefs, as well as the Broncos, Chargers, and Raiders. Another one of these videos should pop up right about now, and you can find all but the AFC West up in my feed already. Otherwise, I hope to see you back later this week for the conclusion of all this draft-related content, before we get back into more off-season oriented stuff. So, until then, see you later. Peace!